Just crack me up. Mm, Quest. Mm, Anyway, back to Joan. Soon one heard the deep tones of the organ and of chanting men. Then one saw a long file of lights approaching through the dim church. And so came the abbot, as in his sacerdotal panoply, bearing the file, with his people following after. Sacerdotal means priestly. All of his accoutrements. Panoply means all of it. He delivered it with solemn ceremonies to the archbishop. Then the march back began, and it was most impressive, for it moved the whole way between two multitudes of men and women who lay flat upon their faces and prayed in dumb silence and in dread, while that awful thing went by that had been in heaven. That awful thing went by that had been in heaven. This, I guess, St. Ignatius Press was definitely touched by heaven. I have evidence of it. Came flying toward me to confirm what I knew in my heart, what I saw with my spiritual eyes. This august company arrived at the great west door of the cathedral, and as the archbishop entered, a noble anthem rose and filled the vast building. The cathedral was packed with people, people in thousands, period. Only a wide, that's a bad sentence. Only a wide space down the center had been kept free. Down the space walked the archbishop and his canons, and after them followed those five stately figures in splendid harness, each bearing his feudal banner and riding. They were riding their horses in the heavy. Oh, that was a magnificent thing to see. Riding down the cavernous vastness of the building, through the rich light streaming in long rays from the pictured windows. Oh, there was never anything so great that the steeds don't have to go number two. Right? But I visited Versailles, and they talked about this. Said, why does this place smell like a giant urinal? Because they just went in the corners in these beautiful castles. I mean, it was so bad. They rode clear to the choir, as much as 400 feet from the door, it was said. Then the archbishop dismissed them, and they made deep obeisance till their plumes touched their horses' necks, then made those proud, prancing, and mincing, and dancing creatures go backwards all the way to the door. That does sound magnificent, which was pretty to see, and graceful. Then they stopped them on their hind feet and spun them around and plunged away and disappeared. That does sound amazing. For some minutes there was a deep hush, a waiting pause, a silence so profound that it was as if all those packed thousands there were steeped in dreamless slumber. Why? You could even notice the faintest sounds, like the drowsy buzzing of insects. Then came a mighty flood of rich strains from 400 silver trumpets, and then, framed in the pointed archway of the great west door, appeared Joan and the king. They advanced slowly, side by side, through a tempest of welcome. Explosion after explosion of cheers and cries mingled with the deep thunders of the organ and rolling tides of triumphant song from chanting choirs. Behind Joan and the king came the paladin with the banner displayed, and a majestic figure he was, and most proud and lofty in his bearing, for he knew that the people were marking him and taking note of the gorgeous state dress which covered his armor. At his side, the Sire d'Albret, for the Constable of France, bearing the sword of state. Bearing the sword of state. After these, in order of rank, came a body royally attired representing the lay peers of France. It consisted of 3 princes of the blood, and Le Trenoir and the young Duc de Lava brothers, the Bishop of Lyon, Chalon. These came the grand staff, all our great generals and famous names, and everybody was eager to get a sight of them. Through all the din, one could hear shouts all along that told you where 2 of them were. Live le Bastard of Orleans! Satan La Hire forever! They called La Hire Satan because he was such a good warrior. La Hire forever. Its August procession reached its appointed place in time, and the solemnities of the coronation began. They were long and imposing, with prayers and anthems and sermons and everything that is right for such occasions. And Joan was at the king's side all these hours, with her standard in her hand. But at last came the grand act of the king. The king took the oath. He was anointed with the sacred oil. A splendid parsonage, followed by train bearers and other attendants, approached, bearing the crown of France upon a cushion, and kneeling offered it. The king seemed to hesitate, in fact, did hesitate, for he passed out his hand, for he put out his hand and then stopped with it there in the air over the crown, the fingers in the attitude of taking hold of it. But that was for only a moment, though a moment as notable as something when it stops the heartbeat of 20,000 people and makes them catch their breath. Yes, only a moment. Then he caught Joan's eye, and she gave him a look with all the joy of her thankful, great soul in it. Then he smiled and took the crown of France in his hand, and right finely and right royally lifted it up and set it upon his head. Then what a crash there was! All about us cries and cheers and chanting of the choirs and groanings of the organ, and outside the clamoring of the bells and the booming of the cannon. The fantastic dream, the incredible dream, the impossible dream of the peasant child stood fulfilled. The English power was broken. The heir of France was crowned. She was like one transfigured. So divine was the joy that shone on her face as they sank to her knees at the king's feet and looked up at him through her tears. Her lips were quivering and her words came soft and low and broken. Now, O gentle king, this is the pleasure of God. Now, O gentle king, is the pleasure of God accomplished according to his command, that you should come to reigns and receive the crown that belongeth of right to you, and unto none other. My work, which was given me to do, is finished. Give me your peace, and let me go back to my mother, who is poor and old, and has need of me. The king raised her up, and there before all that host be praised her great deeds in most noble terms, and there he confirmed her nobility and titles, making her the equal of a count in rank, and also appointed a household and officers for her according to her dignity. And then he said, you have saved the crown. Speak, require, demand, and whatsoever grace you ask, it shall be granted, though it make the kingdom poorer to meet it. Now that was fine. That was royal. Joan was on her knees again straightway and said, then, O gentle king, if out of your compassion you will speak the word, I pray you give commandment that my village, poor and hard pressed by reason of the war, may have its taxes remitted. It is so commanded. Say on. That is all. All? Nothing but that? It is all. I have no other desire. But that is nothing, less than nothing. Ask. Do not be afraid. Indeed, I cannot, gentle king. Do not press me. I will not have aught else, but only this alone. The king seemed nonplussed and stood still a moment as if trying to comprehend and realize the full stature of this strange unselfishness. Then he raised his head and said, she has won a kingdom and crowned its king, and all she asks and all the will take it is this poor grace. And even this is for others, not for herself. And it is well. her act being proportioned to the dignity of one who carries in her head and heart riches over our value, which outvalue any that any king could add, though he gave us all. She shall have her way. Now, therefore, it is decreed that from this day forth, Domremy, natal village of Joan of Arc, deliverer of France, called the Maid of Orleans, is freed from all taxation forever. Whereat the Silverhorns were jubilant